Hi, welcome to the Vegan Transformation Book Club, episode one. So glad you're here, whether you're joining me live or perhaps catching the replay. And those of you that do join me live, I'd love for you to feel free to share in the comments or the chat where you're joining from. And as I dive into things today, do feel free to put comments or questions in the chat because I will get to some of those throughout our time together. But I'm so excited to be here with you today. I'm going to be sharing my slides, and so I'll come in and out of those. So if there are comments or questions, I'll just kind of come back out of the slides to have a conversation. So let me see with my slides. So welcome to the very first episode of the Vegan Transformation Book Club. And this is a special day for me. Not only is it Earth Day, which has special meaning, but it's also the 1-year anniversary of my book's launch. And it's hard for me to believe that, it's been a year. So it's exciting to be launching this on this special day. So share a little of the agenda. I'm going to share a little bit about what is the vegan transformation, a little of my background and how this came about for me. We'll dive into the joys and challenges of being vegan. I'll share 7 pillars for thriving that came through my book research, and then how these pillars can empower you as you navigate challenges and create more joy and purpose as you're either moving toward or living a vegan lifestyle. And wherever you're at on that journey, you are welcome here, whether you're just kind of curious to know more about this lifestyle or whether you're already vegan and just want to really thrive and have a greater impact. I'm glad you're here. As I share the slides, I found out when I brought it up in my live stream here that some of them didn't translate perfectly from how I had created them. So I apologize for that, but you'll get the point. So let's talk first. What is the vegan transformation? And I call it the vegan transformation because I think there are certain changes that can unfold for us when we go on the vegan journey that I'll be sharing more about as we're talking today. And if you've had your own changes, I hope you will feel free to share them. So at any rate, let's go into what is transformation just in and of itself. So this is a definition from a dictionary, a thorough or dramatic change in character, condition, or form, closely aligned with the word metamorphosis, which is an abrupt and startling change induced by or as if by magic or a supernatural power, much like how a caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. And some of us, as we go on our vegan journey, we do experience some dramatic changes. And I don't mean just the physical changes of making a lifestyle change or a dietary change, although that can certainly happen too. There's sometimes a lot of inner changes that unfold, some of which we may or may not have even expected. So before I really get further into this, I want you to think about, what transformation do you hope to create? Maybe you're hoping for physical healing of some sort in your life, or to just have better health and energy so you can do the things you care about. You might want to have less anxiety or depression, more joy or peace or fulfillment. You might want to just be more true to yourself, live a life that is really true to you. I mean, these are sometimes tough times, and it becomes more and more important to us to each be who we truly are and also serve our unique purpose. We're not all meant to do the same thing. We're not all the same kind of person. So what is your unique purpose? Maybe you want to create better relationships, better support in your life, and have more effective communication. You might be on your spiritual journey. And you may also just see the hurt and suffering in our world, animals, humans, the planet, and want to create healing. Those of you that are here live, feel free to share in the comments, what is the transformation that you might already be working on in your life? Also, feel free to share where you're joining from if you like. So I'm going to share a little bit about my own story and my transformation. I've been a clinical psychologist and a licensed psychologist for over, it's going on 28 years now. And for 25 years of that, I was a psychotherapist until just a couple of years ago. And I help people work through things like stress, depression, anxiety, just the general traumas and stressors of life. And I've always been passionate about holistic wellness and healing and our transformational journeys. But even though I cared about well-being and fitness and health personally and professionally, I really was sort of lost for many years of my life when it came to nutrition. I wasn't a healthy eater. I was a chocoholic. I had a lot of comfort eating. I didn't like to cook. I just really didn't like to think much about eating other than just what was comforting and convenient. And I loved animals and nature, but I could never imagine becoming a vegan. Just, I grew up in the Midwest. I thought that meat and dairy had to be part of my lifestyle in order to thrive. And I just couldn't imagine, what a vegan or a vegetarian would eat or how they would live. And I just really, even though I lived in farm country, I didn't really know what happened to animals or the realities of that. So my transformation started with seeing a program on PBS. It was just happened to be a segment in a program I was already watching. And when I watched the program, it showed about workers in a meat processing plant and the injuries that they were having and how their employer really treated them very poorly. Many of them were immigrants and felt they had few other options for work and had frequent injuries. And then their employer was discouraging them from seeking treatment or taking time off work, or they would lose their job and their livelihood. And just what little I saw got me thinking for the first time about how my food got to me. And then I went deeper. I was sort of like, well, if you don't like what's happening to the workers, what do you think happens to the animals? And that led me on a whole path of discovery where I started by buying a cookbook the next day and trying my first vegetarian recipe, which turned out to be like an adventure. And I found that I actually started to enjoy cooking and trying new foods. I became curious about the nutrition of plant-based eating. And then I started to really learn more about the ethics and what happens to the animals, the health benefits, all of that. And I would say that compassion for animals was really ultimately the driving force that led me to say, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And then it took me a while longer to become fully vegan, but finally, by facing what was happening to egg-laying hens and dairy cows, I just kind of finally went fully vegan and tried to include it in all the different aspects of my life the best I could. And I found, especially when I became vegan, there were a lot of inner changes. Yes, there was better health. I was blessed to already be fairly healthy, but I did have more energy and improvements in certain things like seasonal allergies. But I also, beyond that, found things like peace, a greater sense of purpose, a feeling of really being true to myself. I've always been a compassionate person, but I had never made the connection really, or let myself see the connection with what I ate and the other purchases and choices I made. So this all led me, to become a vegan lifestyle coach and educator through Main Street Vegan Academy and to do the Food for Life training and plant-based nutrition certificate from the T. Colin Campbell Institute and all of those different things. And then ultimately to become an author, which is something I had long dreamed about. In fact, since childhood, I had dreamed of writing a book, but I hadn't, been sure what that topic was going to be until I became vegan. And I just knew it was going to relate to that and bringing together my background in psychology. And so I'm really honored that, not only did I finally write the book I'd long dreamed of, and I also am really thrilled that the book was the winner of 2 awards, the Vegan Choice Award and the Outstanding Creator Award. And the latter is not a vegan competition. So people who are not vegan read the book and found benefit in it as well. So it was really a great honor. And I think in many ways, I just became more true to myself and more authentic when I became vegan. I've always been an introvert and I still am, but there was something about becoming vegan that helped me want to be more out there and sharing it because I feel like it has so many benefits for everything that I care about. I think I realized that before I became vegetarian and then vegan, I had seen a vegan lifestyle as depriving, all or nothing. If you're not perfect, then don't try at all, and just too difficult. I think I also thought that it wouldn't be very socially challenging, which it can be. Um, but what happened is, as I went on the vegetarian and then vegan path, is I came to see that everything is connected. I came to see that, I chose this out of compassion first for the workers and then very quickly evolved into compassion for the animals when I realized what the realities were. And then that kind of led into like, wow, well, it's great as I'm compassionate towards other beings. It also happens to be kinder to myself and the planet. And I have less risk of the heart disease that runs in my family. So all of this was super exciting to see unfold. Yeah, thank you, plant-based diet, for sharing that. It is exciting how this all comes together. Um, so I think for me, what I found is that when I connected with a strong reason why for this lifestyle, it made it a fulfilling adventure. And it also gave me strength for the more challenging times. Because there have been both so many positives that have unfolded, and then there have been times where it is more challenging. And yet I'm committed no matter what. And perhaps you feel that way too, that you want to live this lifestyle, whether for health, for animals, the planet, or all of the above. And it's not always easy in a world where we're a small percentage of the population. So hopefully growing, but it's still in everyday life, not always easy. But there was a lot of positives for me that unfolded, a lot of excitement about this lifestyle, especially in the early stages. And it led to me doing research for my book, my own transformation. And then as I talked to other people who had had changes professionally, socially, emotionally, spiritually, I felt that there were a lot of books out there about the physical changes that can happen with a plant-based lifestyle. And there's certainly a lot of books, that help us to know the ethical reasons why this lifestyle is valuable as an act of compassion for all beings. But I felt like there hadn't been as much out there about how does being vegan affect us from a more emotional or psychological standpoint. And that's really what I wanted to look at through my research. So I did a survey that about 345 to 350 vegans completed. And then I went into in-depth interviews with about 75 of them. And what the survey and interviews were looking at were, how does the vegan lifestyle affect people socially, emotionally, and spiritually? What are the benefits? What are the challenges? And how do people deal with and overcome the challenges? So let's talk about that a little bit. The joys and the challenges of going vegan. And just want to say real quick that in the book, The Vegan Transformation, I'm really kind of touching on maybe the introduction and chapter 1 in today's session. And when you read the actual book, which I hope you will, but you're welcome to join this book club, whether you read it or not, because you'll gain, insights from what I share in the book. But in chapter 1 in the introduction, I get into really some of the why of the vegan lifestyle. And some people have shared with me that it's a helpful description of why people might choose this lifestyle that not only helps solidify your own reasons, but is a great way to share with others, because it's shared in a non-judgmental way and kind of educational and inviting way. And I've had some non-vegan friends say that they were more interested in this lifestyle as a result of reading those initial chapters that kind of pulled them into the reasons. But once we kind of have our why, and we've decided to embark on this lifestyle, there can still be both joys in this lifestyle as well as challenges. And I see it as a social, emotional, psychological, and spiritual journey. There's also the physical component as well, but I think it all ties in this mind, body, spirit, heart. And so let's talk about the challenges first. And maybe you can relate to some of these. Um, for example, the hardest part for many of us isn't the food or figuring out what to eat. It's the social gatherings, the family dinners, the holidays that center around animal foods, the challenging conversations, the feelings that come up when maybe you feel different than everybody at the table. I'm curious if any of these, you can relate to yourself. You feel grief, sadness, or anger about the suffering of sentient beings or the destruction of our planet. It might feel more grief if you're carrying it alone and others just don't want to hear about what you've learned. You might be the only vegan in your social circle. And some of my friends who are vegan have shared that even like sometimes their family has excluded them from events since they went vegan. You might experience anxiety, frustration, or sadness when you see celebrations and events that center around harm to animals, whether it be foods or whether it be entertainment. And all this can be intensified just by whatever else is going on in your life and the world. For me personally, I had challenges when I first became vegan with the social aspects. I realized I was more of a people pleaser than I had thought I was. And when I had to be the person speaking up and saying, hey, I'm not eating this birthday cake, at a family birthday celebration, it just felt really hard to do for some reason, even though I was deeply committed, and I had a strong reason I wanted to do this. Initially, it was like building a muscle, I think, to be able to share with people that I was vegan and maybe why I was vegan and what that meant in terms of what I would be consuming at these kind of family events. Over time, I did find my groove with that much more, and I learned how to share it with people, and I learned to bring foods that people could enjoy, as well as myself. But it was a learning curve. And then more recently, I would say, I've found the last year or so very stressful just in terms of the environment globally, nationally, and politically. And it's just sort of that has, I think, and there seemed to be a little more negativity about veganism sometimes in the social media and the media. Even though I know that goes up and down over time, it's just felt a little more negative to me in the last year. And so some of that's been challenging. Not anything that's made me want to change my path, but I think it's led to some emotional challenges on this journey for me. So those of you that are here live or maybe that catch this later, I would love for you to share if you feel like it, is there an emotional or social challenge that's been hardest for you? And feel free to share that in the comments. I mean, we are not alone in this and, daring to take a path that maybe not everybody else is taking around us. And feelings can come up related to that, emotionally or socially, that don't always get talked about. So I want to invite us to consider moving from coping to thriving. Certainly we all need to have skills to cope with the ups and downs of life. But there is that possibility that not only can we cope, but we can thrive. And, it's interesting. When I researched and wrote my book, I did the research and interviews and surveys in 2021 and 2022. I wrote most of the book in 2023. It went to my publisher in 2024, and then it came out in 2025. And a lot has changed in that time frame. There was a lot of excitement about the vegan lifestyle a few years ago. 2019 was considered the year of the vegan. And there was a lot of excitement in the media about plant-based foods and just different things. I was feeling some of that because that was actually the year I transitioned from vegetarian to vegan. And since then, as I mentioned, sometimes there's been more challenging kind of experiences in social media. and other places. And so I think the pillars that I discovered through my research and through the interviews with the vegans I talked to and surveyed, these are pillars that sometimes you'll experience naturally on your vegan journey, and sometimes you might need to cultivate them during more challenging times, whether they're personally challenging times or societally challenging times. So just kind of be aware, like some of the pillars that I'm going to discuss next might come to you naturally, or sometimes you might need to nurture them in order to really experience their benefits. So these were the 7 key pillars that came through my research, surveys, and interviews with the vegans that participated in my study. And, the basic kind of core pillar, and I'm going to go through each of these so that we can kind of know briefly like what each of them is about. I won't go into super depth about them because that's actually what subsequent book club episodes will be about, because some of the chapters dive into these pillars in more depth. But yeah, so I'm going to dive into these a little bit here. I'm going to share one of the comments. Plant-based diet says, yeah, veganism is apparently no longer a popular trend. And I guess it goes up and down, doesn't it? Sometimes it's more popular and other times it's not. And I guess those of us that are committed to it for ethical and other reasons, we have to kind of have these tools to kind of stay committed and, really caring about this journey, and so that we can navigate the ups and the downs of it, because there certainly can be both. So these key pillars were the most common benefits that people shared with me that they experienced emotionally and or spiritually on their vegan journey. Not everybody had every one of these, but these were the most common ones that people said that were emotional shifts that they had as they went on their vegan journey. And if you find that some of these are not things that you've experienced, but you'd like to, these are all things that are part of really positive psychology, you might say. They're part of what can create a life of well-being emotionally. And so we can nurture and develop these. So the first one is aligning with core values. And that was really the foundation. That was really the core change that fueled all of the other pillars that I'm going to share. So by moving in the direction of veganism or becoming vegan, you are taking steps to align with core values that most human beings share. Things like compassion and caring about the planet and caring about other humans, and perhaps really taking care of your health in more truly healthy ways. So caring for animals, most of us do. The research shows the majority of people, whatever their background, don't want animals to be harmed, or don't want unnecessary suffering to animals. So by taking that path of being vegan and really looking at what actually happens in animal agriculture and other industries, and actually taking that step to eat in a way that causes the least harm and to make other choices that cause less harm, we're aligning with core values, and that itself is deeply fulfilling. I heard that over and over again from the people I surveyed and interviewed. Like, one of the key things that they found was beneficial of becoming vegan is like they no longer had the cognitive dissonance of making choices in their everyday life that were actually causing harm and going against these core values. So there can be a peace that comes with aligning with your values. And so it's really important to connect with that. Like, what are my values, and how does moving towards veganism or living vegan really align with that? And can I feel some peace with that? That even though I can't control everything in this world, I can control my own choices. And this is one thing I'm doing that feels really good. Then the next one is expanding your circle of compassion. Again, whatever the person's reason was for becoming vegan, some people started for health reasons, but over time also learned about the animals, and that kind of became part of their motivation. Um, but the majority of them said they felt they had expanded their circle of compassion, and that even though being compassionate can have pain associated with it because we feel more empathy, then there's also, again, a benefit when we become more compassionate. We're more true to ourselves and our truest nature. Becoming vegan for many people leads to greater meaning and purpose. Some people actually align their life professionally to include veganism as part of what they do, whether it be educational or teaching people, coaching people, doing volunteer work, advocacy, social media posts. It just becomes a part of people's meaning and purpose because it ties together so many things that really matter in our world. And it can help people themselves live a more healthy and fulfilling life, but it also helps other causes we care about, like the well-being of animals and our planet. Authentic fulfillment was another pillar. Now, by authentic fulfillment, I don't mean that someone feels happy all the time. What it does mean is there's this deeper fulfillment that we're doing the best we can do to live a life that's true to ourselves. And that might mean having both tough emotions and joyful emotions, because that's part of being human anyway. And then being vegan, we're facing some things that maybe other people aren't looking at. And so by honoring our truth, we're more authentic, but there's also a fulfillment in learning to just live the best life we can. There can be ups and downs, so we have to learn how to navigate the tough emotions as well and realize they're part of the experience, and even tough emotions have a purpose. Meaningful connections. One of the things so many people I interviewed reported was they had connected with others that shared their values, and this led to just a deep joy in connecting with others who care about the same things. And I've found this when I've been in different vegan groups, both locally and globally. Like there's this immediate shared commitment and value system. And along with that meaningful connections, people also had to learn to navigate relationships where there were differences and how to do that in a way that hopefully could still preserve some connection with people we care about, but being able to navigate differences in ways that lead to maybe greater understanding. Not always easy to do. Self-improvement over health, self-empowerment over health. Some of the people, whether they chose this lifestyle for health or whether they chose it for the animals, or some combination, they over time found sometimes that their health actually changed in pretty dramatic ways just by leaving animals off their plate and choosing a more plant-strong, fruit and vegetable-strong lifestyle. And then one that I hadn't fully expected, but came through in a lot of the open-ended questions was spiritual deepening, people feeling like it was helping their spiritual journey to be vegan because it aligned with their deepest values. And sometimes it opened them up to greater intuition and connection. And they also became, whether they were spiritual or not, a lot of people shared that they felt more interconnected with life, with nature, with all beings in a way they had never really experienced before. So, these were the pillars that came through my research, and they're all pillars that I have been found through psychology to help us live a healthier, emotionally healthy life. So you might think about where these fit for you, and each of these will be, delved into more deeply in subsequent book clubs when I go through the different chapters, and I even have exercises for how you can deepen into them. And I do talk about them in my book, The Vegan Transformation, in depth, with each chapter having stories that illustrate them and also exercises that implement how you can build on these different transformations. So I think it's just really important to know that these pillars can be nurtured. There's going to be times you might experience them more naturally, and there's times you might have to nurture them in order to experience them, but they can bring us greater peace and joy and fulfillment as we're on this journey. And the way I think about vegan transformation is it's not just a physical transformation, although that can happen. It's actually an inner transformation that can unfold when you truly align with your values, when you dare to broaden your perspectives and see the realities of things that are happening in the world to animals and other beings. And you find the courage to take that road less traveled. Right now, it's the road less traveled. Maybe in time, it will be, more integrated into our society. But right now, it still takes some courage to be the one that dares to be different. And then also when we expand our compassion to include yourself in all sentient beings. And I say that because sometimes as vegans, we can be very compassionate for others, but forget to include ourselves. And that's going to be a theme that comes up a lot, is that in order to sustain this lifestyle, we do need to include ourselves as we would other beings. And, others of us still need to learn to broaden our compassion to others, other animals, other humans, for whatever they might be struggling with that we haven't wanted to look at. So I'm grateful to see Uncaged Heart here, as well as a plant-based diet. I want to share this comment where Uncaged Heart Coaching shares veganism is a huge spiritual element of my life. This is my friend Marakita, who was interviewed for my book actually, and shares a little of her story in chapter 8, I believe, the chapter on spirituality. So glad you're here. Yay. So I'm going to give you an exercise to think about here. And I apologize however the slide kind of overlapped. Maybe next time I'll have to do it in Google Slides and see if it kind of comes out better here than the way it did from my PowerPoint. But at any rate, I want to have you think about for a moment, wherever you are on your journey, whether you are plant curious, whether you're vegan, whether you're a long-term vegan, it's always helpful to reconnect with our why, because there will be those times where we're really into our lifestyle and it comes easily. And then there's times where maybe things that are happening in our life or the world or the way people are reacting towards us, it makes it more challenging. And so when we remember our why, our reasons that we're on this path, and we really connect with it at a heart level, it kind of helps everything else come together more easily. So I'm going to invite you to think about that for a moment. What is your why? What led you to move towards this lifestyle or is leading you to consider it? And if you're already vegan, also, what's making you stay vegan? Because sometimes once we become vegan, there's more than one reason. We might have started for one reason and then we learn about other things, and there might be one primary reason, but there might be other things that also play into it. And then once you connect with, well, why am I vegan? Why am I moving in this direction or living this way? What's made me committed to this? Go deeper with it. Why does this matter to me? What difference does this choice make for things I care about, for myself, for other beings, for other people, for the planet? Yes. Yeah, I love that. My why is compassion for all beings. And that connecting with that and writing that out. And I invite, anybody else that's here live or joins later on, feel free to share in the comments. What is your why? What keeps you committed to this lifestyle? And really connect inside with why that matters. And I invite you to write it out and keep it somewhere where you can have it, on a Post-it note or an index card, somewhere where you can see it regularly. So on those tough days, you really remember your why. And not only does it give you resilience so that you can navigate the tough times, I think it also can bring joy, because hardships and challenges can feel more fulfilling if there's a purpose behind them. That brings a depth to what we're doing, that we realize this matters beyond the toughness of this particular moment. This matters for things I truly care about. And I'm honoring my commitment and my devotion. I'm honoring my compassion for all beings, or whatever your particular motivation is. If you're healing from a disease, that matters. We can't really show up to help other people in whatever way we do, or other beings or the planet, if we're not doing well health-wise. So all of that does matter. And I think it all really connects in ways that maybe at one time it didn't connect so much, when there wasn't such an industrialization of animal agriculture and other exploitive industries. But now that it's so industrialized and large scale, it affects so much. And caring for animals means we're also caring for all beings, and we're caring for ourselves and the planet. So I invite you to share which of the pillars really hit home for you, and what's a step you can take to build on this. I'll go back to where the pillars were for a second, just to remind you of what they were. And I'd love for you to share in the chat which one kind of really stuck with you as like maybe something that either you want to develop more for yourself, or maybe is something that you're already experiencing as part of your journey. What is the pillar that hits home for you? Is it you're aligning with your values and being true to your values? Is it expanding your circle of compassion, whether that means including yourself finally in that circle, and or including other beings? Is it having more meaning and purpose in your life? Is it being fulfilled in an authentic way, not one that is just like a superficial, I'm trying to be happy all the time, but one that really faces the tough stuff in life, but still finds fulfillment in doing the best you can? Maybe it's meaningful connections with others, self-empowerment, or the sense of spiritual deepening or interconnectedness. And just want to share, one person shared with us the interconnectedness. Yeah, it's so interesting how that came up, because I never thought to even ask that question when I was doing my survey. And that was one of the things that came through so many people's open-ended responses, was this interconnectedness. It was just this sense of like, I feel, now that I'm not eating animals and I'm eating plant-based, and I'm eating foods that are better for me vibrationally and kinder and more compassionate, like all of a sudden I feel this connection with nature and sentient beings and all life in a way that I hadn't before. One of the stories I share in my book, Nancy, she says it's like almost like she had the LASIK surgery and suddenly could see things differently. So just a reminder, my book, The Vegan Transformation, that is now celebrating its 1-year anniversary here on Earth Day 2026. It came out Earth Day 2025. It's available in paperback, ebook, or audiobook. I think Amazon has a really good deal on the paperback. Sometimes after a book's been out for a while, they sometimes bring the price down. So it's actually a really good price right now, I think, almost 50%. And also you can, follow me on my website, AngelaCrawfordPh.com. I'm really thrilled with some of the feedback that readers have given, who are in various places on their vegan journey. One, Linda, shared that she loves how my book, shares how to be a better human and live with purpose, but also that it's given her a way to care for her whole emotional self with mindful exercises. Because like many vegan advocates, she's had to learn to include herself in her circle of care. Jennifer shared that it was exactly what she needed to refresh her enthusiasm for living a vegan lifestyle. And JJ, shared how it went deeper to the soul, heart, and soul of what changes when we align with compassion, and how it explores the emotional, spiritual, and psychological transformation that often comes with going vegan. So I want to kind of just see, is there anything that you can really share that maybe you're taking away from what I've shared so far? And before, I want to just share one more comment from Animal Listeners Books, who wrote a great book that I also love called Animal Listeners. I have it over there by R. Aveen, and it's a great book. So she says that the pillar that stood out for her was aligning with core values. So yeah, there's something that's just so transformational about that. And it leads to changes you'd never expect when you really, truly honor that. Another comment here from Uncaged Heart Coaching. Your book is filled with grace and wisdom, a cycle of spiritual integrity. I appreciate that. Thank you. It was really a journey to write it and to connect with parts of the vegan journey that I hadn't heard many people talk about in depth before, even though maybe I'd seen it touched on. And I think now that the book is out there and the world goes through its cycles and changes, I'm aware of how some of us maybe need support in nurturing these different aspects of our journeys so that we can really thrive and get through the times that are harder, and continue to be a source of inspiration for others in the world who really can benefit from aligning with their values and their compassion in this way, and finding the interconnectedness that is there once we kind of take this path. So some takeaways that I want to just highlight as we're wrapping up. One, the vegan journey has a lot of reasons why we head on it, but they all sort of come together as we start to learn how the way we treat animals affects so many other things, from our own health to pandemics, to the environment, to our emotional well-being. And there are different ways, these 7 pillars that I share, that we can both find joy on our vegan journey and on our path towards living more true to ourselves. And we can cultivate and nurture those different pillars. And I hope each month to dive into each one of those and how we can do that. And then the third takeaway is connect with your why and find a way to revisit it regularly. Have it somewhere where on those tough days, it's there to inspire you. On good days, it renews your energy and reminds you why this matters. And if your why evolves over time, you can change it, add more to it. So I do want to invite you, if you haven't gotten the book, feel free to buy it wherever wherever it's available, wherever you choose to. But no matter whether you buy it or not, we're going to be here each month and you can still gain things from the conversation, whether you've read the book or you haven't. And next month, we're going to dive into chapter 2, which really has to do with what was just mentioned by Animal Listeners' books about aligning with our core values. We each have, these core values, and just because we're vegan doesn't mean that we're always aligned fully either. There might still be a growth that we have in aligning even more truly with our values in different ways. But what I found in my work as a psychologist was that one of the biggest causes of sort of the emotional malaise or existential challenges that some of us struggle with is when we aren't really in touch with what our values are and perhaps are not living fully in alignment with them. So we're going to dive more into values next time, how we can honor our values, and maybe in doing so, understand why others might not yet be in the same place on their journey as we are and how we can better communicate with them. So feel free to share in the chat any final thoughts you have, any other takeaways that you want to share. I thank you, those of you that join me live, and those of you that catch this later, please feel free to share questions or comments in the chat. I will kind of check back to them to see what your thoughts are. This was exciting for me to share this this day with you, celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the book's launch. And I will say too that it's a great book to share with those in your life who are not yet vegan but might be curious, because it's written in a really non-judgmental way. I've been told by many people that it doesn't come across as preachy or judgy, but it's inviting to people who are exploring this and want to know the benefits of this lifestyle. So, Well, thanks so much for being here. Thank you so much for joining me whenever you join me for this conversation. And I hope you'll join me next month. Let me see what the day is. May 27th, Wednesday, May 27th at the same time, where we'll cover chapter 2 in the book. So, and some of the key insights from it. So thanks so much for joining me. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.